Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we are looking at House Martell, or House Nymerios Martell to give them their full title. This is the latest in a series of videos we've been doing going around Westeros from the north all the way down to the south, looking at some of the more interesting houses. Last week we looked at House Dane, this time we're looking at House Martell. Not entirely sure where we go next, I think probably up to the Stormlands from here. But today we're looking at the Martells. If you're watching live, then apologies if you've come in and this is an hour one way or the other. We're at that weird time of year when clocks change. In my country, the clocks changed last weekend. I think in other countries, they're changing on other weeks. So apologies if it's a bit out time-wise this time. And what's the other thing I was going to say? Oh, yeah, if you're watching live, happy Halloween if you are celebrating. If you're not, happy Thursday. Now, what we're doing today, as I say, is we're looking at House Martell. I've got some questions from my patrons. I'll try and get through as much as we can in the chat. I have a feeling a lot of people are doing Halloween things today, so it might be a slightly shorter live stream than normal. However, I will start by talking about a little bit about the background of House Martell. Let's add in the map, which is what we always like to do. This is quartermaster.info, still my favorite interactive map of Westeros that we have. And to introduce House Martell, I think we have to say, first of all, they are not a First Men house, which is what I think a lot of people assume they must be, because the First Men, when they first arrived at Westeros, they came in from this armland sort of bridge, which went across there, you can see from the northeast of Dorne all the way across to the disputed lands in Essos. Now, that's where the First Men came in. That was destroyed by the we think by the Children of the Forest, and the First Men moved through Westeros and headed up in through Dorne and headed up into the rest of Westeros. However, this was not the last invasion of Dorne that happened. The Andal invasion, we've talked about this quite a few times over the last few weeks. The Andal invasion happened a few thousand years later, and this wasn't a mass one-off big invasion, a huge fleet coming across in one time. This was a very long, slow, drip invasion. There'd be families coming across. There'd be then you'd get a sellsword company coming across. Then you get the remains of a small petty kingdom moving across, trying to find new land. House Martell came across from Essos, and they landed here in Dorne, in the south. And they carved out a little bit of land for themselves, defeating the First Men who were there already, and made themselves lords. They never, incidentally, became kings in here. We often think of before the Targaryens or whatever, then there were lots of kingdoms going around. That is definitely still true in Dorne. There were lots of kingdoms, but the Martells, for whatever reason, never really styled themselves as kings. And they never were, during that time, really that powerful. They had a small section of land, a slither of land down here. You can see this on the map where Sunspear is, and you can see the river that goes through, the Green Blood River, that sort of runs east-west down towards Planky Town there. This is one of the few parts down there on the southeast coast, one of the few parts of Dorne that things grow in. There's huge amounts of mountains, there's huge amounts of desert just down there on the coast. This is when, and along the river, this is where you get a lot more vegetation. It's still very warm, it's still quite arid, but you do get a reasonable amount of vegetation. And the Martells seemed happy to be settling there. And for quite some time, there was lots of battling between the various lords and kings in Dorne, but the three biggest and most powerful houses towards the end of this period were House Ironwood, House Dane, who we talked about last time, and also House Fowler, over on what became later known as the Prince's Pass. And as far as we can tell, the Martells were okay with the situation. But then came another invasion, and this is the Rhoynish and Nymeria and her ships, her 10,000 ships. And the story of Nymeria is a long one. We may get to still one of the possible TV shows that we've got coming ahead. It's not been greenlit. It's had 2, 3 different writers attached to it over time. The clear implication is that there is a story there that HBO wished to tell. George R. R. Martin seems reasonably keen on it as well, but they just haven't managed to get it right yet. But anyway, they arrive after being basically kicked out of their home in the River Rhoyne by the Valyrian freehold. They go on this long, we might now call it an adventure. It probably didn't feel like it at the time, that this ragtag fleet headed off to a variety of different places, trying to find a new home before finally arriving in Dorne. And Nymeria, who was their princess, their leader, she burned the ships as a sign. This is it. We're not going anywhere else. We're now staying in Dorne. Now, the importance for the story of the Martells is that the leader of the Martells, Mors Martell at the time, he saw an opportunity, because suddenly there was this new and really quite large group of people who were there literally now going to be fighting for their life to try and carve out a bit of land. And the Rhoynish arrived, and instead of fighting them, Mors Martell decided, why don't we strike up an alliance? In fact, he married Nymeria and said, okay, let's merge our two houses. And he did. So the house is Nymerios Martell. And as a united house, they then moved across Dorne and defeated all of the other lords and kings that were there, and then united it as one kingdom. I say kingdom, little asterisk next to that, but we'll come back to it. United it as one kingdom. And as a part of this, they adopted some of the Rhoynish traditions and culture, one of which was the idea that you do not have kings, you have a prince or princess. Another connected to this is that the firstborn inherits, not what almost all of Westeros seemed to practice, which was some version of male preference primogeniture. Men inherit, women do not inherit. So that's a big departure, and it meant that the ruler of Dorne was always called either princess or prince. They were never kings. And House Martell, Nymerius Martell, I won't always say Nymerius Martell, I will call them House Martell because that is what people generally still now call them, but we shouldn't forget the Nymeria link across here. House Martell created a stranglehold on power. They then became the ruling power all the way through for the next 700 years. I say the next 700 years because after 700 years, that's when the next invasion happened, and that was the Targaryens. And the Targaryens arrived, as we know, with these grand visions of unifying the Seven Kingdoms. And most of the Seven Kingdoms they found nice and easy. And people bent the knee, or if they didn't bend the knee, then the dragons melted to them, and that was pretty straightforward. However, when it came to Dorne, there's a long story about exactly what happened, but basically they came in, they burned the Dornish castles, sent in an army or two here or there, and the Dornish just faded away into the desert. They knew their terrain. They knew how to defend their place, and they would just disappear. And the moment the Targaryens had gone away, they'd reappear again. And eventually, it's got to a position where the Martell house words, unbent, unbowed, unbroken, they're just not going to give in. They managed to shoot down Princess Rhaenys, or Queen Rhaenys, I should say, and her dragon, Manaxes. And from there, they managed. I'm not going to go into all of this in detail. I'll read. I did a video on this ages ago. I will redo it. But they basically went with a peace offer. The yellow toad, the affectionate-ish nickname for the Princess of Dawn, had died. Her heir took over, Prince Nymor, and he was a lot more in favour of talk and peace. And so he came with a peace offer, which King Aegon, grudgingly accepted. And peace was secured for a long time. There was then a series of quite a rocky history going forward. There are a number of further Dornish wars. We had an invasion by Doran I. We had this kind of contrition walk by Baelor the Blessed, and then eventually we have a couple of marriages with the Dornish, which tie the Dornish into the Targaryen family tree. And a part of the Seven Kingdoms, but again with a lot of concessions. And the concessions were basically that the Dornish could just carry on as they were. Yes, they were a part of the Seven Kingdoms. Yes, they owed their fealty to the Iron Throne, but they could carry on calling their leader prince or princess. That's absolutely fine. They could carry on practicing their own laws of succession. That's absolutely fine. They could carry on with their own customs. The only difference was that they owed their fealty now to the Iron Throne. And that close relationship, over a lot of different times, you find when you start reading through The World of Ice and Fire, the way that Dawn is treated slightly differently, and the close relationship between the Targaryens and House Martell has led to a lot of friction. Because in the rest of the Seven Kingdoms, they'd been part of the Seven Kingdoms for much longer, and they did not have those same concessions that the Dornish did. And the Dornish still felt a little bit different, a little bit foreign. They looked different. They had different complexions. They had different ethnic heritage, being Rhoynish. They had different traditions, and they were pretty much all walled off from the rest of the Seven Kingdoms by mountains. Actually, not many Dornish made it out beyond Dorne. The extent to which, when Arya is down south, she's like, "Oh, are you Dornish? Is that?" I thought all Dornish were like that. She had an idea of what Dornish people were because she'd never met anybody Dornish before. So the Dornish were tied in quite closely to the Iron Throne, to the Targaryens. We will talk a lot about this, I'm sure, as we're going through. We know the whole history about Rhaegar and Elia married. And what happened after that. So as we move into the story we have in A Song of Ice and Fire, we have the Dornish who have a grudge against the Lannisters and have largely been sitting out politics. They were very closely embroiled with the politics of the Seven Kingdoms until Robert's Rebellion, and then after that they just withdrew. Prince Doran is playing a long game. He's playing, some argue, quite a subtle game. He's certainly playing patient game, but it's becoming more and more apparent the further into the books we get. It's becoming more and more apparent that it's a very determined game, and his determination is that he will get revenge on the Lannisters, and he will get House Martell back to the position that they were in to start with. So that's the broad overview of House Martell. Let's go into the chat. I think we've got a couple of questions. Shantanu David Thank you very much. Very generous of you, saying, "Hail, hail, Robert, most mellifluous of name." Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the content created so generously, the comfort your voice provides during the dark, and the literary contemplation it sparks. Thanks for the life saved unknowing, with soporific voice and stimulant thought. Well, those are very kind words. Thank you very much. I hugely appreciate that. Thank you. Marian Toda saying, "Hello, first time writing." Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I listened to all of your lives before. I listened to all of your lives before bed. Excellent. Really loved your series about Robert's Rebellion. Cheers from Romania. Well, hello to Romania. Great to see you. Okay, so have a quick flick through. If I've got any other questions in the chat. Happy Halloween, Lady Sophia Valarion. Lots of people talking about Halloween. Yeah, it's there are vague fireworks going on in the background here. But yes, I think a lot of people are off doing Halloween things. Okay, let's go to a question from my patrons, and a question from Gina Z saying, "Happy Halloween, Robert, and to you too. Could you talk about the involvement of House Martell, if any, in the Dance of the Dragons?" Yeah, I'm very happy to. The short answer is there's not a lot of it. They were involved. At this point, it has to be said, they were not a part of the Seven Kingdoms. We should probably clarify this. They were an independent nation. So when we're talking about a civil war, a Targaryen civil war, then they're not a part of that. If they did become a part of it, it's the role of an external nation getting involved in somebody else's internal civil war, which raises a whole other set of issues. They were, however, involved in the build up to this. You'll remember there was a long running saga about the Stepstones. And the Stepstones, I mean, there were a variety of people who sort of took the Stepstones, but the Triarchy were taking the Stepstones and claiming the Stepstones. And then at another time, we had Corlys Velaryon and Daemon himself coming in and taking them back. Daemon even declaring himself king of the Stepstones in the Narrow Sea. There was a lot of toing and froing here. Dawn did wade in on that on the side of the Triarchy against Daemon and Corlys. Now, the critical thing there was that this was technically a proxy war. This wasn't the Triarchy against the Seven Kingdoms. Both sides were sort of like keeping things at arm's length. On the side of the Seven Kingdoms, then basically Viserys was like, "Okay, well, let Daemon wage his war. If that's what he wants to do, let him go off and do that. This isn't the Seven Kingdoms getting involved actively. He can go off and do his thing." And a similar approach was taken by the Triarchy. So Dawn getting involved in that wasn't actually them getting involved in the wars of other countries, technically. However, when the Dance of the Dragons happened, when fighting broke out, Dawn were obviously very close to the action. They were an independent nation, but still in the continent of Westeros. So both sides considered, what do they do about Dawn? Can they possibly get them on side? And the Hightowers did attempt to, Otto Hightower this is, when he was writing letters out, you remember quite early on in the war, future Aegon II got quite frustrated with this because he didn't seem to be getting many results from it, but he wrote out letters all over the place trying to get support. And one of those letters was off to Dawn to try and get their support. And the reply from the Prince of Dawn at the time was simply that he would rather what was the exact phrase he used? I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically he said no. There was a fantastic little phrase he used. he'd rather lie with scorpions. I think it was something along those lines. Um, so um, it, the answer is no. They were then not involved from that moment on, and there was no expectation of involvement for them. Let's go into the chat. So Gilio's asking if I could explain the integration of the Roinar into local Andal and First Men culture and why the orphans of the Green Blood decided to refuse assimilation. How do they differ most from others? Okay, well, um, the orphans of the Green Blood, this isn't a thing which was really covered on the TV show, so do not worry if you missed it. When the Rhoynish came over and Nymeria burnt the boats and said, right, we're now staying here, a lot of the Rhoynish kind of looked around and thought, well, this isn't the green and pleasant land we came from. But their culture was very focused in on the River Rhoyne. And so they felt, all of them to a degree, felt having left the River Rhoyne, which they treated like a god, really. They felt like orphans. And some felt this so strongly that they refused to integrate with the people that that are in the land that they'd come to. So with the Dornish. Nymeria, her plan was that she would happily marry people. She would try and gain political advantage. She would attack people, take lands, whatever it was to secure the place of her people there in Dorne. The A certain subsection of the people that she brought with her decided actually we don't we don't want to integrate. We don't want to marry into other cultures. We don't want to do this kind of give and take about, okay, yeah, maybe you'll accept this part of our culture, we'll take on that bit of your culture. They tried to recreate the culture that they'd had before in Dorne, in the biggest river that they had, which was the Green Blood River. And they called themselves the Orphans of the Green Blood. Orphans because they were still gone from what they would consider to be Mother Rhoyne. So that's what happened, and we see them in. Pardon me. We see them in A Song of Ice and Fire. They do play an important role a couple of times. They live on the river. They have these boats, very low-lying boats, flat boats that they would sort of pole up and down the river. And they would live this more itinerant lifestyle on the river rather than settling down in a castle or a city or anything like that. They would do that. And at the end of the river, Clanky Town is known as Clanky Town because all of the boats, various points, they come down to this end of the river and then they tie them all up against each other and create this kind of floating town. That sometimes when there's festivals and things like that, it can be quite massive and busy. Other times it can be a lot smaller. But this was their culture. So they tried to retain their own culture, not on the River Rhoyne, but still a river-going culture. And the rest of the Rhoynish decided to integrate, marry into, take on a lot more of the local First Men culture and Andal culture that was already there in Dorne. Luna Cascade saying, hello, Robert. I enjoyed your Traveler's Guide series. I noticed it's no longer the channel. I liked the POV of the average person. Yeah, so that has come down, but it is coming back up on first of all on Patreon. I'm redoing it. There's there's a number of reasons why I took it down. One of the reasons was that we've actually got a whole load more information since I first did that. We've had Fire and Blood, we've had House of the Dragon, we've had a whole load of things George R. R. Martin has said. So I can now add in a huge amount of extra detail into this. Also, there are some places I didn't go to. and the sound quality wasn't great on some of them. As I say, a whole load of reasons. I am redoing them. They're coming back up onto, first of all, Patreon, then probably onto this channel. So yes, I recognise people liked them, and they will be back up. Do not worry. Let's go to a question from Lord Medici, saying, 7 blessings, Robert, and to you too. I feel that one of Game of Thrones' prime achievements is conveying a different feel for every kingdom, and perhaps no better example of this than Dorne. I feel like giving the Dornish a distinct accent to match their distinct culture was amazing. As far as I understand it, this was not originally planned, but was Pedro Pascal's initiative, and everyone else just went along. But this distinctive Dornish accent does not seem present in House of the Dragon. Why is this? We do have a couple of people from Dorne. It seems like an obvious thing to miss and a relatively simple thing to do, which would help give Dorne its distinctive feel. And so Friend has also similarly said, how much did Pedro Pascal set up Dorne for failure on the show by just being too damn good? Well, first of all, yes, Pedro Pascal was excellent. Obviously, in this, his breakout role, really. And yeah, from what I understand, that was right. It was his idea to have more of an accent coming from Dorne. He is the first main Dornish character that we meet. Him and his paramour, of course. But I mean, I'm with most people in saying I was slightly underwhelmed the Dornish plot as a whole. But yes, I think that it did work because Dorne should feel different to the rest of the 7 kingdoms. The North should also feel different, and I think that they did a reasonably good job of making the North feel like it has its own culture and is different. And I think they've done that also in House of the Dragon. As for why they've not kept that up, kept the accents up in House of the Dragon, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that one, I have to admit. Yes, I think it was, pardon me, I think it was good. The only thing I would say in terms of accents, which is probably more obvious to a native British person than to others. The accents, although they did try to keep the same accents roughly for different parts, this was by no means up to all the time. So, for example, the accent given to Davos was completely different to the accent given to Stannis, say, or even Robert Baratheon, despite them all coming from the Stormlands. So this is it is a thing that they tried to do, broadly speaking. They tried to make Northerners have Northern English accents, but it wasn't universal, as I say. Question, quick flick through the chat. Erin Sunex saying, hasn't Kristen Cole spent a good deal of time away from Dorne or spent time with non-Dornishmen? Yeah, I mean, he was Dornish on the show rather than in the book. As I say, I have no answer on why they decided not to go with the Dornish accents. I mean, the other thing to say probably about Dorne, connected in with what I was saying a bit earlier about Arya when she's like, aren't all Dornishmen like this? I'd heard this. There are different types of Dornish people. Very broadly, the way that it's described, the Maesters describe this as you have the salty Dornish, you have the stony Dornish, and you have the sandy Dornish. And these are very broadly different. So you get the Martells are the salty Dornish, more over towards the east coast. Then the sandy Dornish, they're in the deserts, and so they have a lot. They have darker skin and different culture as a result of that. And the Stony Dornish tend to be in the mountains. There's like House Dane and things like that, and they have they speak differently and they look different as well. So, to yes, the accents, the idea of having a different accent for people from Dorne was good, but if you want to go deep into it, you have to say, well, there isn't one Dornish accent. There's many Dornish accents. Luna Cascade saying Doran Martell is an interesting character. Can you give detailed information of his life and impact on the game, as in the Game of Thrones itself? Um, well, I suspect a lot of this will come out through the stream. He's central to most of what is going on with Dawn through Robert's Rebellion into the time afterwards and into the current story. So he was the oldest child of his parents, and his two siblings, Oberyn and Elia, were both significantly younger than him. Elia, I think, was 9 years younger than him. Oberyn, a couple of years younger still. So he's always been that sort of half a generation, third of a generation, whatever it is, older than them, and has always been a lot more of a calming, slow influence. And this is the key thing about Doran, is that his approach is very different to particularly Oberyn, but also a lot of other Dornish. And this is partly due to the fact that he is largely wheelchair bound. He gets a lot of gout. He can't move around a lot. So his way of being proactive and doing things is thinking, is planning. He clearly has a very strong network of people, informants in Dawn, telling him what's going on, and also up into King's Landing as well. And his instinct is always the longer game, compared to someone like Oberyn, who's a lot more passionate, a lot more about action here and now. And George R. Martin has done a lot of work just to compare these two people, and how we see that playing out is, and I've said, I'm sure I will say this again, probably in this stream, but I've said many times, is that Doran's cunning plan, very broadly, is to marry Martells to the Targaryens and to get to power that way. Now, he wasn't. Perhaps it wasn't his doing that Elia, his sister, married Rhaegar, but he certainly was Prince of Dorne while that was there and enjoyed the power and influence that provided him. When I was going to say when that fell through, when Elia was brutally murdered, then after that, you get the choice of how does he respond. Oberyn wanted a quick and violent response, and Doran decided no. He instead decided to secretly side with the Targaryens in exile, and so he arranged a marriage between Viserys and his daughter Arianne. When Viserys died, he then sent off his son Quentyn to see whether he could marry him off to Daenerys Targaryen. Then he hears a rumor that there's somebody saying that they're Aegon the Sixth, and he sends Arianne off. Half a mind, maybe we can get an alliance going on there. His plan basically is to marry Martells to Targaryens, and it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek to say that that is his cunning plan, but he does do that quite a lot. And sort of that is showing us the kind of speed that he's moving at. He's not planning on immediately winning the Game of Thrones. He set up a child betrothal, which he knew wouldn't come to fruition for 10, 15 years. So he's long thinking. Now, when you're saying what impact has he had on the Game of Thrones, his impact has been holding back the Dornish. That's the biggest impact until the moment when he's ready. And the moment when he's ready is coming quite soon, I suspect, in the story. Once we actually get Targaryens with armies arriving back in Westeros, we'll suddenly see him throwing his weight behind them. So his impact has been to hold everything back. And just at the end in Dance with Dragons, we see him starting to move his pieces into the right position as well. He is setting the Sand Snakes free to go off and kill Lannisters. Basically, he's now starting to allow his long-term plans to come to fruition. Right, let's go to Lord Medici also saying that you have expressed that a thought that after the Dance of the Dragons TV show, House of the Dragon, we'll get Aegon's conquest. I know you hate casting actors for roles, but who do you think would make a good Meriah Martell? And what about Prince Nymor Martell? So I personally, this is Lord Medici saying, I personally think Antonio Banderas would make a great Nymor based on age and weight as an actor. And linking back to my earlier point, he could also nail the accent. Well, he definitely could. I will, as you guessed, I will happily throw this one to the chat. So we don't know what's happening after House of the Dragon. We've obviously got Dunk and Egg, Night of the Seven Kingdoms coming, but the kind of hints we've been getting have been that we'll get Aegon's conquest. And for that, yes, we will need the Yellow Toad, Meriah Martell, and Nymor Martell probably as well. Now, what we want for Nymor is somebody a lot more peaceable, willing to negotiate. Somebody from Meriah Martell who is willing to stare the Targaryens in the eye and just say no. So what we need is a character or a character actress along the lines of Diana Rigg when she was being the Queen of Thorns. That's the kind of feel we have for her. I mean, if I were fan casting, I would put somebody like Judi Dench or Miriam Margolyes, who both would be. I think Miriam Margolyes would physically fit the description quite well, I suspect, with a little bit of makeup. But we and both probably, I'm sure, could nail the accent. But what do you think? Let me know in the chat. I'll just have a quick flick through, see. What people are saying in the chat. A bit of love for Miriam Margolyes there, which is always good. So happy with that. Okay, let's go to a question from Bear Island saying, hello, Robert. I hope you and Dan are well. We are, thank you. Although Dan doesn't like fireworks, so this isn't the best time of year for him. This is my first chance to attend live in a long time after being sent back to the office. Well, welcome. It's great to see you. The World of Ice and Fire states that Doran's mother had several miscarriages and that both Mors and Oliver Martell died in the cradle. Doran's siblings only survived when he was away as a squire to Lord Gargolin. The Order of the Green Hand did a video suggesting that not only did Doran kill his siblings, but that he's now deliberately sending his children to their deaths. I think it's a fun theory, but the evidence is thin. What are your thoughts? Yeah, well, I'm always in favour of alternative viewpoints, and I've had the Order of Green Hand on this channel. It was a while ago now, but I had them on the channel a few times, actually. I love their inputs. I think I would tend to agree with you on this one, though it has to be said. There, um, there's no. Well, to take the two parts of this, might Doran have been murdering his siblings? Well, I think you have to um, accept the fact that if you're accusing him of that, you're accusing him of doing that while he's a very small child. So we're told that his mother had several miscarriages, and also there were two children who were born who died in the cradle. Um, we're told that um, Doran uh, was not around from the age of 9, and before that he spent a reasonable amount of time not there but in the water gardens. So what you're saying is that a very small child was capable of um, forcing miscarriages in his mother and killing children in the cradle, um, and completely get away with it, which doesn't seem likely. And also, there's no hint at all that he um, uh, hated his brother and sister when they did arrive. In fact, quite the opposite. He seemed to have he seemed to love them hugely. So I don't think there's any evidence that that's the case. As for sending his family off to, or was it his children in particular? Um, sending his children to their deaths. So we've got Quentin, who he sent off to Danny. That was a dangerous mission, I'll grant you, but he sent him with two bodyguards who managed to get him there safely. And there's no implication, I think, there that what he wants is for Quentin to die. I think the clear implication is that he wants Quentin to marry Daenerys. That seems to fit in with everything else that we know about him. Sending Arianne off to make contact with, or at least check out Aegon the Sixth, Aegon. Again, he sent her with a strong detachment of people to protect her, and that I see absolutely no motivation or hint that he actually wants her dead. So um, I like alternate thinking. I personally can't see evidence to suggest that that's the case in either part of it. At which point, let's just take a very quick pause. If you are watching this live, could you please just show a little bit of love to the moderators, because they are absolutely amazing. The fantastic job if you're here in the chat, and you're enjoying just talking to people without trolls, and with everybody being able to just say what they want about books and TV shows that they love, then could you just show a little bit of love to the moderators, because they're the people who make that possible. Okay. Let's see. Have I got any more? No, I don't think I've got any more super chats. So let's charge on with the questions from the patrons. As I say, this is likely to be a slightly shorter live stream this time, because a lot of people are going off doing Halloween things. Let's go to Commander Ray. I won't be able to watch much, if any, of the live stream because of how busy I am for Halloween. Brackets, I dressed as a vampire today. Strong work. But I'm interested in the Martells and wanted to ask about their role in deciding the end of the story and what shape that will take with multiple Targaryens in play. And as a sort of tie-in, do you think there'll be any Rhoynar magic that'll be used in the story? I don't think Rhoynish magic. We've not seen anyone who sort of claims to be using Rhoynish magic. No, we've not certainly not seen the Martells take the lead in sort of in any of them really saying, well, we'll be using water magic here and doing such. So it would, I mean, I'm not putting it past George R. R. Martin. I suspect that the further into the story we go, the more magic stuff there will be. So it's entirely possible. But I don't see that it's likely at the moment, as in he's not given us a little key to say this is where we should be looking for magic to be happening. So we might have seen some in A Dance with Dragons when we had the Shy Maid, the boat going down the River Royne, and there's a wonderful chapter where you get the boat is going through the Sorrows, which is a site of great magic in the past, and this is Troyrain, the ruins of Troyrain, the ancient great city of the Roynish. And it's the home now of the Stone Men, the people who've had grayscale. And as the boat passes through, it goes past this bridge, and then a minute or two later, it goes past the bridge for a second time. And lots of readers have gone, "Oh, hang on, what's going on here? Is this time travel? Is this some kind of strange water magic?" I think this is water magic. I think that basically the water magic kind of pulled the boat around in eddies or whatever to bring it back to a position where it then went back the way it went before. So that the Stone Men could then jump in and try and attack the boat. So I think that was what was going on there. The idea that this was magical is backed up by the fact that this is the chapter that George R. R. Martin has said that he wrote an extra chapter building off of this for Tyrion, which he really liked, but eventually decided not to include and sort of wrote it out. But he's put it in a drawer in his desk, and he says nobody's going to see that until after I'm gone. Maybe then somebody will sort of release it. And he said the reason why is because it took Tyrion in a direction he didn't want him to go yet, at least, a more magical direction. So magic was definitely happening there. Magic was certainly involved. So I think we have seen some Roynish water magic. It's just a kind of blink and you miss it, and not hugely spectacular. So that's the second half of your question. As for the first half, what role will the Martells play, particularly vis-a-vis the Targaryens? Well, as I say, tongue-in-cheek response to what is Doran's cunning plan is to marry his family to the Targaryens. And I think that's still the plan. I think that's still what he's trying to do. He sent Quentyn off. Now, and Quentyn arrived just too late. Whether he would ever have been successful is an entirely different matter. But he arrived too late. He arrived the day before Dany was due to get married, and she wasn't about to back out of that. It was a long process getting her to the position where she wanted to marry a local person in Meereen in order to help her rule that land. So to have Quentyn arrive then, it was just simply the wrong timing. And he then, however, didn't want to go home empty-handed and decided to go off and try and claim a dragon. There is, as we've seen from the intermarriage, there is some Targaryen ancestry that he did have, and he thought that would be enough. And he goes down there and he gets burned really badly, and eventually he dies. Now, by the time that has happened, Dany's gone, and Sir Barristan's in charge of the city, and he makes the decision that he is going to send Quentyn's bones back to Dorne. with a little note from him, sort of saying, "So this is what happened," and so I think we have to just for a moment put ourselves in the mindset of Doran Martell receiving the bones of his son, and this little note that says, "Please find attached your son's bones. He tried to tame a dragon, got it wrong. Um, he came here to propose, just so you know the whole story. He came because Barristan's an honourable man. He'll tell him what's going on. He came obviously trying to marry Daenerys. She said no, and now she's disappeared, and we don't know where she is. So, what's Doran going to do when he gets that? Well, first of all, he's going to be angry, sad as well, obviously, with the loss of his son, but he's going to be very angry about what happened. And he's going to think, well, that's it, Daddy's gone. She's disappeared. She's been gone now for a long time. Maybe she's not coming back. However, while that's going on, there's another person claiming to be a Targaryen who has landed, and from what we can tell, has taken Storm's End, which was a massive prize, and is probably about to go and take King's Landing. There's a fair chance that he's got an army already. There's a fair chance that the reports will come back that he seems like a really good guy, the kind of person you would want to be king. And there's also a fair chance that the Tyrells might come in behind him, because he's obviously going to be opposed to Cersei, and Cersei's almost certainly going to be taking on the Tyrells in the first part of the Winds of Winter. So suddenly we're going to get this massive army headed up by a Targaryen about to take King's Landing. Who is Doran going to be throwing his support behind? This guy, or the princess who's just rejected his son and has now actually disappeared? Well, he's obviously going to throw his lot in with Aegon the Sixth. So I think that's the role that the Martells are going to be playing. They're going to be supporting Aegon the Sixth, which incidentally means that we have to get into our mind this clear idea of the two armies that we've got attacking one after another. The first army with Aegon the Sixth. Yes, he started out with over in Essos, but he is arriving with the Golden Company, who are exiles from Westeros, or the successors to the exiles in Westeros. Plus, probably he's going to have Dorne and the Martells on side. Plus, he's probably going to have the Tyrells on side and some other mysterious friends in the Reach. So, if you take that and look at it, you go, okay, so actually, suddenly, if you add in John Connington, who's there from the Stormlands, who will probably be able to rally a little bit of support there, you've got a reasonable amount of the south of Westeros already supporting this person. He will feel like a genuine Westerosi candidate to be king. Compared to Dany, who will arrive having never set foot in Westeros in her entire time, having probably picked up a whole load of weird foreign customs while she's off in Westeros, with foreign sellsword companies, with the foreign Unsullied, with the foreign Dothraki, with the support of the foreign Red Priests. All of this is going to make Dany feel like a foreign invader, whereas Aegon is going to feel like almost homegrown, somebody who is quite Westerosi. So that's I think the key thing is that when we get the Dany arriving, she is going to feel like a foreign invader, and probably we're going to have Aegon sat on the throne looking like a Westerosi king, which is a completely different dynamic to what happened on the show, because on the show, she's there with what appears to be, yes, there were some the Unsullied was still there. Yes, the Dothraki was still there, but she had the Ironborn. She was there. She got the Martells on side, the Dornish on side. She got a whole range of people supporting her. Excuse me for one moment. Dan is wanting to come into the room. So possibility of Dan the Dog cameo, but I suspect he just wants to lie down in here because of the fireworks. Don't get your hopes up, everyone who's hoping for a Dan the Dog cameo. Right, let's go to a question from Mr. Worldwide, saying, I hope you and Dan are well. We are. Thank you very much. Other than the fireworks. My question is about Princess Arianne. Who do you think betrayed her? And will her confidence in her manipulation skills potentially be her downfall, kind of similar to Cersei in a way? Well, who betrayed her? So this is a book-only plot. So if you'll show any person, then you'll be unaware. Well, you'll be unaware of Arianne to start with. Arianne being the daughter of Doran. Now, Doran, as we've said, is very slow. He's very cautious, and almost everyone around him is getting frustrated. And Arianne among them. She's also particularly frustrated about the fact that she thinks that she's being passed over for the what she thinks should be hers by right, being ruling after her father. And she wants to hurry things along. And she has this cunning plan that why don't they set Myrcella Lannister, who's been taken, who's fostered now down in Dorne, and why don't they take her and they marry her to Doran Martell, and they then pronounce her Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. It's a cunning plan. They say that under Dornish customs, then she should be, because she is, after Joffrey's death, she was the next oldest. So in Dornish culture, she should be the person inheriting, not Tommen, who was the youngest child. So her idea was that you can, if they go ahead and do this, they can prompt a war, or prompt the Lannisters into a war, and if you do that, then this will help them gain the revenge on the Lannisters that they want. It's a plan. Whether you think it's a good plan or not, it is definitely a plan. Now, she gathers together a group of friends to do this. She seduces Aris Oakhart, who is the Kingsguard there, who should be protecting Myrcella. She gathers together some of her friends. Gerald Dane, Darkstar, also she gets onto her side. She sort of not really captures Myrcella. Myrcella seems to be going along with this and doesn't know all of the plan, but trusts Aris Oakhart. And the idea is that they're going to go off they're going to get a boat from some of the orphans of the Greenblood, get on this boat, head down the river, and they're going to figure out what happens after that. Now, when they get to the boat, then suddenly Arya Hota, who is Prince Doran's right-hand man and bodyguard, suddenly appears with a whole load of guys with crossbows and stops the plot. And Arianne, the last of that chapter that we hear, Arianne is there begging to know who betrayed her. Who betrayed her? And Arya Hota has said someone always tells. And this is a mystery. We're not told exactly who did this, how she was betrayed, what happened. And to be honest, this has been set up in the way that a lot of George R. R. Martin kind of little mysteries in Song of Ice and Fire have been set up, is that when it first happens, we're supposed to be kind of scratching our heads and going, well, who did that? It could be a number of different people. And it's only maybe the next book or the book after that suddenly we get extra clues that help us figure it out. It doesn't, fundamentally, it doesn't affect huge amounts of the plot, because the important point is that is stopped. Doran pulls together Arianne and the Sand Snakes and stops all of their plotting. And then at the end of the Dance of Dragons, he sends them out to go off and do their thing. So it doesn't actually matter hugely who did it in terms of the plot. However, we obviously want to know. Now, there are lots of different ideas going around, none of which have convincing evidence behind them, I don't think. Some have suggested maybe it's Aris Oakhart. That doesn't seem likely. We see these things through his POV. It feels too much of a trick by George R. R. Martin for him not to allow us to hear those thoughts of him going, oh no, I really shouldn't have betrayed her. We hear so much of his interior monologue that we would have heard. Darkstar, you have to ask what he would have gained from it. She has 3 friends who she thinks maybe one of them did, but then they are all taken away and basically punished by Doran. And so you have to wonder, well, if they were the person who kind of like gave it away, surely Doran would have rewarded them, not punished them. So it seems unlikely it's them, which leads to what I think is the most likely option, which is a tweak on one of the most popular ideas out there, which is that Doran just figured it out. Because he's clever, he's got spies, and he heard stuff. That's the end of it. I suspect that there's a grain of truth there, but I would add in an extra layer, which is, I think, the biggest clue we have is the fact that they got stopped at the Greenblood just as they're about to get onto a boat, which seems to imply whatever Doran heard, he heard the bit about the plot about where they're going. And a lot of people in that group did not know where they were going. So we can rule out a huge amount of people. There is one person who definitely knew where they were going, who's this guy called Garin. He's a young orphan of the Green Blood and one of Arianne's good friends. However, we're told a number of times in slightly different ways that he does talk a lot. He boasts quite a bit. We hear about him boasting about who he slept with. We hear about the people, his family, who were also involved in this on the boat, about how they were gossiping. And so it seems likely that it's not that somebody talked, somebody gave it up, somebody thought, oh, no, this isn't this isn't a good plan. I should tell Doran about this. It's just that somebody was gossiping and they let it out. Garin was just boasting about the fact that I'm involved in this amazing thing and I'm going to bring these people to this place. That just kind of fits the facts. And the other thing that we have to say with this is that Doran almost certainly the way that this has been set up, he will have been aware that people had this thought already about making Marcella queen, announcing that she's the queen of the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and prompting a war. And we know that because Ariane's at least the third different person around him to have come up with this idea. We get Oberyn even mentions this to Tyrion as a possibility of what could happen. He's thought about this. And then we get Tyene Sand, who you get actually to rewind a little bit, the first chapter when we meet Doran, this is an Arya Hota chapter, and at the beginning of a feast for crows, and we get introduced to the whole Dornish plot. Basically, in this chapter, is that Doran is there in the water gardens, and he eventually decides he has to return back to Sunspear because there are so many plots going on, particularly by the Sand Snakes. And the one Sand Snake comes to him. Obara comes first and says, "We got to do something. Oberyn's been killed. Let me have an army. I'll split it. I'll have half of it go over to Old Town, attack that. Nymeria, Nym can have another half. She can go off up and attack the Lannisters. Go on, let me do this. Let me get at them." And Doran's no. And then we get Nymeria herself, who comes and says, "Come on, Doran, we have to do something about this. Oberyn's just been killed. We need to get our revenge." And she says, "Just let me go and assassinate some Lannisters. Let me and Tyene, come on, my sister, we can go off up to King's Landing and we'll just kill a whole load of Lannisters." And Doran's like, "No, you can't do that." And then they get to Sunspear, and Tyene is there. And she says, "Hey, what about we make Marcella queen? We marry her to Trystane. We say that she's queen. We get the Martells back into power. We start up a war that way. The Lannisters will be forced to come and attack us when they're already weak, and we'll win." And this is pitched to him. Again, Doran says no, but this is actually pitched to him as an idea. Now, Tyene and Arianne are close, very, very close, and Doran will know this. Arianne thinks of it as that she has no secrets from Tyene. So Doran will know that if Tyene's got these ideas, and Arianne has got those ideas as well. So he will already have been thinking, what's Arianne going to be doing? He'll know that she's angry with him. He'll know that she's the personality type to go off and try and do something, probably do something quite rash. And he knows that her bestie has already pitched to him this idea of, "Hey, why don't we take Marcella and make her queen, force a war that way?" He is clever enough to think, okay, maybe that's what Ariane's planning. Let's just set a few people out and try and figure out, listen in on what's going on. And he found out that way. That is my best take on what it is. The idea that somebody has to do the betraying. This has been set up as that somebody has to have been betraying. I don't think somebody has to have been betraying. I think somebody could have just given the game away because Doran was listening out for it. Um, uh, da, 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 quick flick through the chat. Now, Holland suggesting that Garin wanted her. He went to Doran to protect her in a flight of fancy. He might have even imagined that Doran would have accepted him as a match for Arianne. Yeah, it's possible. And let's flick back to a question, I think, from Jay, saying, "I haven't had a Thursday afternoon free in a while. Hope you're well. Hi Jay, good if you're there watching live. Fantastic to have you. Saying, can you discuss Dornish relations with Essos before they came under Targaryen rule? Yeah, I can do. It's we don't get huge amounts about it. It has to be said, but Dorne is probably the part of the Seven Kingdoms that has the closest and easiest relationship with the rest of Essos. Um, before After the Targaryen, I know you asked me before, but after the Targaryen invasions, they had a vested interest in that, because otherwise they were just them. So having allies elsewhere when you have the entire rest of the continent basically united against you was very important. Before that, we don't get huge amounts. It has to be said. The Obviously we get the couple of invasions, the Andals and the Rhoynish, but it certainly appears that there was a degree of ongoing struggle over the stepstones for a very long period of time, which will have been not the triarchy only lasted for 30 years or so, I think it was, not huge amounts of time, but the that was basically, if you look at the map, hang on, let's go to the map. I'll quickly do a little bit of geopolitics here. If you zoom out just a touch, the stepstones you will see there, right slap bang in the middle there. If you control those, then you're basically cutting off by sea transport from most of Essos north up to most of most of Dawn going north to most of the rest of Westeros. It's also cutting off sea travel from North Dawn around to South Dawn. So it was in the Dornish best interest to make sure that there was safe travel for their trade. It completely cut off. Imagine not being able to trade up the coast, not being able to go to Myr, to Pentos, to Bravos, or on the west coast, to Duskendale, to um, uh, even further all the way up to White Harbour. You're getting rid of a huge amount of your markets, so it was absolutely in their best interest to ensure that um, sea lane was kept open. So that meant that they would often have small. I mean, it's hard to call them skirmishes because it's island by island, but these small battles against whoever was there in the Stepstones, which sometimes was state sponsored, sometimes wasn't state sponsored. And the other thing to sort of note before the Targaryen invasion is that for most of that time, pardon me, there was the Valyrian freehold, which which had control over most of Western Essos. And the Valyrians did not wish to head any further west. They did not want to go into Westeros, so they kind of held back. So the Dornish didn't. We just get little drips of bits of information. The Dornish had more contact probably than most of Westeros did with Essos, but it wasn't always necessarily positive. Um, Martin, hi there, Martin, saying, I hope all is well. It is, thank you very much. Was Oberyn born naturally agile? He's one of the best spearmen in the land. Yes, I think is the short answer, but also he was incredibly driven. And this is one of the things that perhaps doesn't come across as well with Oberyn on the TV show. I think they did an excellent job with him, but they did kind of give the impression, which he was trying to give, I think, to be fair, while he was in King's Landing, of just being this kind of guy who enjoys life's leisures, so to speak. He will drink. He will go to the whorehouses of Flea Bottom. He will just have fun. In fact, he was an incredibly driven person. He spent a huge amount of time developing his martial prowess. He went, and we'll have a question on this in just one moment, he went over to Old Town in order to study. He became a renowned expert in poisons. He spent a huge amount of time. He had a large number of bastard children, the sand snakes, and he spent a huge amount of time actually being an active parent, being not just absent in a lot of the Seven Kingdoms, indeed in a lot of Dorne. Then if you had a bastard child, and you might just ignore it, or maybe send it a present once a year or something like that. Not Oberyn. He tried to stay actively involved. He rammed a lot of life into what he was doing. So, was he born naturally agile? Yeah, but also he worked really hard. Lady Vaughan-Strauss, hi there, saying my doctor sister and I have our own theory about Elia Martell's failing health, but what are the prevailing theories concerning her physical state? I mean, I don't know if there's sort of like prevailing theories that she was not particularly a strong child, and this. So when she was born, her mother had had a number of um, miscarriages, and a couple of children who tragically died in the cot. And so when Elia was born, she also was quite a weak child. So that does seem to imply that there's some kind of genetic thing or something going on there. That is the sort of the generally accepted wisdom, that she just was always like that. That wasn't a particular cause of it. Yes, if we go back to where one of the earlier questions we had, if you took the view that somebody was trying to poison her, then that perhaps could explain it. But then why wasn't that the case with Oberyn as well? I'd be intrigued what your theories are about her failing health, though. Right, let's go to a question. Hermione, actually, here we go. This was the question I said I had. Oberyn Martell studied at the Citadel. Is it mentioned anywhere, or do you believe he forged any chains before leaving? Yes, so he forged 6 links of his chain. Now, the way that the Citadel seems to work is that you can go over there if you've got the recommendation. You can go off, and then you can try and learn under these different archmaesters. You can learn your link in, which is you've achieved a certain level of expertise in different areas. So you get one person who's there on healing, you get another one who's there on um, uh, finances, another one who's there on the higher mysteries. And each of these people, they will test their students, and when they reach a certain level, then they are deemed to have they are given a link. And once you've got enough of these links, and each of the links is in a different metal, once you've got enough of these links, you can form a chain. And at that point, you can then be a maester once you've got your chain. So that's the idea. And we often think of like Grand Maester Pycelle on the TV show when he's got like this massive like chains all around. Most maesters, they've got quite a small thing. We get, I mean, even I think Maester Lewin sort of tugs his chain because it sometimes chafes against his neck. So you don't get this massive chain. That's a ceremonial chain that the Grand Maester gets. Most it's just a sort of a small chain around your neck. And you get that, therefore, by achieving a certain standard in a number of subjects. Now, to give you a sort of a vague idea about what that means in terms of time commitment, we do get a sort of idea from the chapter that we get based in Old Town. We get a couple of chapters based in Old Town for when Sam are up once, leading up to Sam's arrival, and once where we get Kate and the Alchemist. Now, in both of those, you hear that basically they're students who are chatting about stuff, and so we pick up a few details. Now, the speed at which you can get these, some study for years and never get one at all because they just cannot reach the right standard. So Pate's like this. He wants to be able to study to get these the links to his chain, but he doesn't seem that he's capable of doing that. Others, it seems like if you do 1 a year, that seems like a reasonable rate. 2 a year, you're doing very well. You get Aleris, the Sphinx, I think, has got 3 in a year, which is deemed exceptional work to be able to do that. So what this implies, I think, is that Oberyn was there for at least 2 years, probably 3 years. He seems quite a clever guy, but he was 2 or 3 years in the Citadel studying, and properly studying, not just partying. He will have been properly studying in order to reach the right standard. Now, the other thing to probably sort of think about there is that it's probably there that he learned about poisons. So we're told that he's an expert in poisons, so he probably sort of went over and above to be recognized as a very good and expert in poisons. He didn't just do the normal bit of coursework, do the exam, get through. He probably studied over and above what he had to do. So going to the Citadel is a really quite intensive thing if you're going to take it seriously. Now, a slight digression here into how it works. What seems to happen is that not everybody who goes to the Citadel to study to be a maester actually makes it. Quite a lot of people don't. And so some of them get a couple of links, they learn and study and become scribes, and then they can they can earn a living out in the wide world, and it's completely known and accepted. You know, if you're a scribe, you've probably studied down at the Citadel for some time, which means that Doran going not Doran, Oberyn going to the Citadel to get his 6 links. Actually, it's not like he was there and he got chucked out, or he failed in any way. This is just a perfectly normal thing that some people do. They go study there for a while before they go through the process of becoming a maester. They learn the stuff they want, they go off, they take their skills and do other things with them. Okay, I've got 2 more questions. If your people are just arriving now, then yeah, the timings are a little bit out because we're at that weird time of year where some clocks are going back and other clocks aren't in different parts of the world. So apologies if you missed some of this. Obviously, you can watch this back a little bit later. Let's go to having a quick flick through the chat. Let's go to Relaxed Like a Cat, saying, "Hi, Robert, your videos are keeping me company while I'm working abroad. I'm very happy to do so. How much of the Winds of Winter do you think George R. R. Martin will devote to what happens after the main events of the story?" Actually, yes. So that was the last Martell one. If you've got more Martell questions, please do drop them in the chat. I'm very happy to answer some more. pardon me, this is a slightly more broader question. I assume you're talking about A Dream of Spring as well. So, how much of the story is he going to? How much time is he going to devote to what happens after the main events of the story? I mean, I think there are two answers to this. The first is I don't think he's going to do a 20 years later chapter to tell us all the things that happened after he's finished the main bit of story. I think he might. Maybe he'll do like answer a few questions or do a little epilogue or something that just gives us a few hints about what happens. But I don't think he wants to tell the ongoing story afterwards. What I suspect will happen, though, based on, and we've talked about this from different angles a lot of the time, so I'm not going to give all the background again, but we've talked about this idea of how much, when he talks about the end of the story, he talks about the Scouring of the Shire chapter in The Lord of the Rings, which he showers with praise. He thinks it's masterful, he thinks it's wonderful. And that tells me that that's the kind of thing we can expect. So if we were, particularly at the beginning, if we were sort of to think, well, where's this story naturally going to end? Naturally, the story is we have to deal with the threat with the others, and we have to deal with the dragons in some way. How is a question for another time. But those are the two things in the book one, the opening, the prologue, that show us the others, and then we get the dragons appearing in the very last the very last paragraph of the very last chapter of the first book. We get him talking about a poem, Fire and Ice by Robert Frost, which is very much about two different opposing forces, each of which could destroy the world. That is where he set this up. Yeah, he's moved bits as he's been going on with the story, but that broad end is in sight. So the broad end will happen to the main story when the dragons and the others and the fight for the Iron Throne are dealt with in some way. That doesn't mean that there won't be some loose ends to tie up, which is where we get the link across to the Scouring of the Shire. Because the Scouring of the Shire ultimately is the hobbits go home and find, oh no, it's not all wonderful as we left it. Actually, there's that Saruman guy. I've forgotten all about him. We were dealing with Sauron, and now we've got Saruman we need to deal with. So they go off there. They use the skills that they've learned in the adventures that they had, and then they deal with that final issue. And then we get the sort of the tying everything together in the final chapter. So I think that feel, because George R. Martin tells us that this is what he's going for as a feel, that feel of we have a few things to tie, loose ends to tie together, we will definitely get that. I personally think that Euron will be that kind of Saruman figure, but there will be other things. So he's not going to just leave it lying around so that we simply do not know what's happening with Tyrion, for example. He's not going to just suddenly stop writing about Tyrion, and then we're always going, well, what happened to Tyrion? We will know what happens to Tyrion at the end of the story. We will know all of the main characters will have their own fates that get dealt with. All the arcs will reach their natural conclusion, but we're not going to get, I think, the 20 years later, this is what happened, and then so the Seven Kingdoms survived very well, and then there was a new dragon appeared over here. That we're not going to get any of that, I don't think. I think he will tell the story, tie up the loose ends, and then right to the end. Fingers crossed. I hope he gets there. Let's go to I'm just flicking through the chat just to see what else. we've got going on. Right. Let's go to the final question I've got from my patrons, which actually is this is the Lord of the Rings question. So happy to have questions on anything now in the chat. To be honest, and William Schneider saying, "Hello, Robert. I know I'm off topic, but I saw your video about Sting, the sword, Bilbo's sword, Sting, and the other elven blades. The goblins recognized the swords, and it made me think about your past video about goblin society and community. I think this would bolster the argument for an intelligence and social aspects of the goblins, as well as questioning the lifespan. What are your thoughts?" Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I didn't go into it in the video. If you want to, please do go and check this out. I mean, this isn't the idea of that there must be orc society or something. That this isn't my idea. This is Tolkien has said that, but he said basically we don't read about it because the stories that we're telling are not stories about the home life of orcs. He doesn't say it quite like that, but he says we read stories where the orcs are there in the armies of the evil lords, and so that's what we see. But there are plenty of indications that there is more there, and Tolkien does say, "Yeah, of course, there's more. There's more stuff out there, but we just don't see it." The intriguing thing here is that and this is in the Hobbit, when you get the two blades, Orcrist and Glamdring, that they captured, the dwarves captured from the troll horde way back near the beginning of the story, and they get to Rivendell. Elrond says, "Oh yes, these come from Gondolin from days of old." I've speculated on which swords they are, but when they get to Goblin Town, and the goblins see these, they're like, we know those swords. That's Beater and Biter. They're horrible. They've been used to kill many dwarves. Now, the clear implication of that is that, as you say, yes, there's a degree of intelligence, at least an understanding. I recognize that sword, but also it does call into questions the lifespan of orcs, because given these swords have been missing for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands of years actually, would this generation of goblins, if goblins only lived for 20 or 30 years, then would they really know what those swords look like? Seems unlikely unless some of these did live a long time. And we know that one of the ideas, Tolkien had many ideas about the nature of orcs, and one of those was that they were corrupted elves, and elves obviously um, just live incredibly long lives. Basically, they don't die. They're, to all intents and purposes, Middle-earth immortal. And if orcs are like perverted, corrupted versions of that, then yes, they might also live for a very, very long time. So friend asked, has Robert talked about the Dornish possibly being more loyal than the rest of the Seven Kingdoms? Did I miss that question? In which I do apologise if I skipped past that one. That was unintentional. Let me go back and have a look. Yes, it was an interesting question. You said, there are two questions. Oh dear, I do apologise. I missed these ones completely. Saying, do we know if Oberyn was involved in the fighting during Robert's rebellion at all? So the first part of that, no, which is intriguing. We hear nothing about him during Robert's rebellion, and it's intriguing because we know he was around and about before that, and he was around and about after that. We do not know what he was doing during the rebellion. He was there at the turning at Harrenhal just a few months before everything kicked off. And he was there in Dorne in the immediate aftermath of the rebellion, because he was going around trying to raise an army to take revenge on the Lannisters for Elliott's death. So he was around, but we don't know exactly what he was doing. The implication, the boring answer is probably he was staying with the rest of the Dornish who were trying to sit out the war, largely, because until Aerys, the Mad King, basically threatened Elia, at which point they had to get involved. So the implication is probably Oberyn was sitting out the war with the Dornish. But he doesn't come across as a very sitting out the war kind of guy, does he? So it would not surprise me if we discover that yeah, there's a bit more to this. I This is pure speculation, tinfoil speculation, but we talk a lot about the Tower of Joy and how the way that it's often presented as being just, just a very small number of people there, and not many people knew what was going on in all this big sea, and it wasn't. It wasn't like that. The Martells almost certainly knew about the Tower of Joy. This was a time of war, and the Tower of Joy was a watchtower on the main thoroughfare between Dorne and the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. They will have noticed if the Crown Prince and the woman that he's supposed to have abducted and 3 members of the King's Guard all suddenly sit there. That's not something that you would just not know about. House Fowler had specific responsibility for looking after this. They would have told the Martells. The Martells will have been aware. Who would Doran have trusted to be doing any kind of negotiation needed with Rhaegar? And when we say negotiation, I think we have to go with the assumption that Rhaegar will have known that obviously he's married to Elia, and so he will need to talk to Doran about the fact that he wants to have another child. Elia cannot have more children. It would potentially kill her if she had more children, and so he wants to have a child with another woman, which in Dorne is actually okay. They don't have the same kind of moral niceties about that happen in the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. In Dorne, Oberyn himself, he's got bastard children all over the place, and that's seen as fine and normal and honourable. This is okay. So probably there's some kind of negotiation going on to secure the rights of Elia's children in the line of succession, and while that's going on, they can stay in Dorne. That has to be it. But if Doran had to pick one person to go off and do his negotiation, probably Oberyn. And we know that this is possible because he also trusted. He was the person he trusted to go off to Braavos later to be negotiating there for the betrothal between Arianne and Viserys. So Doran has a track record of using Oberyn like this. And similarly, obviously, he sent him up in the main story. He sent him up to take his place on the small council. So in that situation, completely tinfoil, we've got no evidence other than this kind of makes sense that Oberyn may well have been there as this kind of shuttle diplomat between Doran and Rhaegar. It's as I say, it's possible. We do not know, but it's a fun thought. Then you had your other question as a friend was, is there an argument for the Dornish being the most loyal of all of the 7 or 8 or 9, depending on how you count them, kingdoms? All of the others feature some kind of power struggles or treachery or disloyalty within the last generation or 2. The closest thing we have in Dorne is the Marcella plot, which is slightly different. The idea is to spark a war more than it is to overthrow Dorne specifically. So, yeah, are they loyal? I mean, in this context, I think you mean to the Martells as opposed to the Targaryens or anything like that. Are the various lords of the land more loyal to the Dornish rulers than other lords of the land are loyal to their rulers? I mean, I think it's a fair thing to argue. There are a few examples, notably in the Reach and in the Riverlands, where the lords are um, not treated with the respect that perhaps they could be by the other ancient and noble families, by which I mean the Tullys. A lot of the bigger ancient noble houses think that they should have been made lords paramount rather than the Tullys. The reason the Tullys were made Lord Paramount of the Riverlands was simply because Lord Tully at the time was the first to bend the knee, and Aegon the Conqueror was in the mood of that. If the person there already is not going to do it, then I will appoint somebody who I think is the most likely to be loyal to me. And the person, in the absence of any other information that he had, the person who was most likely to be loyal to him was the first person to bend the knee. So that's why the Tullys are there. Down in the Reach, the Tyrells were stewards, and there are several other families who claimed that they had a much better um, claim to be ruling as Lords Paramount of the Reach after House Gardner had gone. But again, the Aegon chose the person or the family they felt were going to be most loyal. So there's in some parts there's a little bit of grumbling going on. Obviously, in the north we have the Boltons who are always wanting, sort of looking for an opportunity against the Starks. So yeah, I like the idea that clear we've not seen um, the sort of Dornish plots against the Martells. Now, why that is, I think instinctively it's because the Martells seem to rule with quite a light touch. It has to be said. The they set the direction. They can call on troops, gain calling the banners effectively. But what people get up to, even when you get House Will, who went and did things that probably the Martells found incredibly unhelpful. The Martells didn't come crashing down on them, and they just sort of like said, "Oh no, don't do that," and we'll try and pick it up and move on from there. And so similarly, when you get any kind of a family going off and doing a thing that perhaps the Martells don't want to, the Martells have kind of let them do their own thing. So there does seem to be a whole lot more of a relaxed approach to rulership. Hermione saying some houses in the north allow women to inherit, as do the Dornish. In some things, both kingdoms are quite alike, despite being so far apart. No. Yeah, well, this is a very interesting one. So, uh, the first thing to say is that we don't have a clear rule of what inheritance works like in all the different parts of Seven Kingdoms. So we just have to go by what we can see. And in lots of parts of the world, then it seems that male preference primogeniture, the world, Westeros, male preference primogeniture does happen. But we shouldn't think that that means that women cannot inherit. Because a lot of the time, women do inherit under it. If you just look in my own country, in the kings and queens of England, then there have been several very notable queens. Queen Elizabeth II, Queen Elizabeth I, Victoria, etc. And they inherited under male preference primogeniture. It has now changed. It is now the eldest child, but through history, it was male preference primogeniture. And even using that system, sometimes a woman inherited. And that is why you get, for example, in the Vale, in the Eyrie, you had Lady Jane Arryn, who inherited. And we get women ruling in various places at various different times. So, although we don't know the exact rules everywhere, I don't think it's fair to say that women never rule or cannot rule, but most of the time they do not. So the with the Starks, it's interesting. It's something I have thought about a lot. With the Starks, they do talk about succession. When you get Rob, who's thinking about doing his will, then he has a discussion with his mother about who should inherit after him. Now, he at the time thinks that Bran and Rickon are both dead. So he has a discussion with his mother, and basically he comes to the conclusion he has to make Jon his heir. And the reason why is not, well, Sansa and Arya can't inherit. It's because Arya, he thinks, is dead. The implication was that if Arya was alive and well, he would have made her his heir, and there was no sort of doubting that or saying, well, she can't inherit, she's a woman. That the clear implication was that she would have been heir, and he would have named her in his will. That's what Catelyn was saying, basically, and he didn't at any point dispute this. Sansa, she'd married the Lannisters, and there was absolutely no. She'd married Tyrion by this point, and there was absolutely no way on the planet, given the fact that they were at war with the Lannisters, that he would name her his heir. That's why he went to Jon. But the clear implication was that the succession could have passed to Arya. We get another couple of examples. So in the north, we get the example of Bear Island, where it is ruled, it appears sometimes, by women. We don't know the rules of succession up there. And then we get the intriguing one, but again, there's no implication. If you go back through the history, there's no implication that women always inherit, or even that it's 50-50. It's just that that's one of those things that, the men had all died, so a woman inherits. However, we get the intriguing case of House Reed, who we know so little about, but it's very clear that when they come up to swear loyalty, fealty to Rob, Bran is there on behalf of Rob, they're introduced as Lady Meera and Jojen. And it's very clear that she is the heir, which seems to imply, yes, she's older, but it goes to her rather than to Jojen. And I have used this as, it's not the biggest bit of evidence, but it's a small bit of supportive evidence for the idea that perhaps this is where Ashara Dane is. And she is married to Howland, and she's the mother of Jojen and Meera. And she has, as part of that, she has introduced this idea of the eldest inherits, which is part of Dornish culture. So that's quite a long and rambling answer to that. I don't know whether that did answer it, but the idea that there are some things in both kingdoms in the north and Dorne that are alike. I'd say one of the biggest things, leaving inheritance and stuff to one side for a moment, is this sense of identity as a region, as distinct from the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. And those two, and also the Iron Islands, are probably the strongest. You would look at the Reach and the Riverlands and the Westlands and the Vale of Arryn, and the culture there is quite similar across all of. There doesn't seem to be a huge culture shock going from one place to another. However, going to the north seems to be a bit massive culture shock. For Catelyn, going to Dorne seems to be a big culture shock, because things are done very differently there. So they seem to be a completely standalone culture because of a couple of things. First of all, geographically, they're quite cut off, both of them. The mountains around Dorne, and then you get the single route that you can go overland into the north. And then also this distinct ethnic and cultural inheritance, which in the north, first men, with the exceptions like the Mandaleys, etc., but they're first men with their own religion of the old gods. And then you get down in Dorne, you get this curious mix that we have here with things that you just don't get elsewhere, like the Rhoynish, for example. So you get, I think, similarities is probably the wrong way of saying it, but they both have this kind of same differences, if that makes sense. And let's have a quick flick through the chat. As I say, I'm through all my questions from my patrons, so let's just have a quick flick through the chat. And Lady Vaughan-Strauss saying Catherine de' Medici was married to one and mothered 3 kings of France, and none were named Louis. Good fact. I like that. There were a lot of Louis, though. It does have to be said. 16, I think. And the BLA saying, I'd live in the Red Mountains of Dawn. Sky Reach is the perfect place. That's the home of House Fowler. Yeah, that seems good. I mean, I don't know whether I'd want to live there. I still think Highgarden's probably the best place to live in Westeros. Okay. So I think with that, let me start to. I've had the map up all this time. Here's me. So what we've got coming up? I'm going to start a new series of videos on the main channel about some of the big classic questions, particularly about the North. To start with, I'm going to do this leading into, a lot of people have asked about Robert's Rebellion series. I'm going to be bringing that one back. So this is going to start leading into that. But it's sort of partly based on the whole load of videos I did ages ago, but I've had another whole new look at a lot of these things. And so it's a new slant on this. And I'm starting off with, why must there always be a Stark in Winterfell? So keep an eye on that, out for that. That's going to be happening probably in two weeks, maybe 3 weeks' time. And then I'm working through what actually is going on in the crypts of Winterfell. What is that all about? What are the links between the Starks and the others? And then maybe, let's see if I get inspiration, maybe what do we know about the others? What do they actually want in the books? Because obviously on the show, we learned some things, but that may or may not, didn't learn everything. We may or may not be the same on in the books. So going back to some of the fundamentals of this, I think I've been doing a lot of videos for obvious reasons recently about Targaryen history. I thought because of House of the Dragon, let's go back, let's do some of the really proper meaty Stark stuff. Why must there always be a Stark and Winterfell? What winter is coming? What does that actually mean? What's going on in the crypts? What about the Horn of Winter? So that's the kind of thing that we're going to be focusing a lot on over the next few weeks on the main channel. Lord of the Rings videos as well coming up, and a couple of little surprises as well. I enjoy doing this, an introduction to videos on random things every now and then, so keep an eye out for that. On this channel, more of these live streams. I had grand plans for doing a whole load of other things, but I have got a couple of interviews lined up with interesting people, which will be appearing on here in the course of the next few weeks, so do keep an eye out for that. But if you are watching this back a little bit later, I've not said thank you to patrons yet. I always say thank you to patrons. Patrons, thank you. I hugely appreciate what you do. So I'll do it the other way around. Here-ish, if you're watching back a bit later, is a link to my Patreon, which is the best way to support this channel if you so wish. If you'd like to watch more videos appearing somewhere around here, there'll be a link to a playlist with other live streams that I've done. Moderators, thank you. Some fantastic chat here. Hello to you if you are watching this over on X. I see you. I know you're there. I know I'm answering questions over on YouTube, but I know you're there as well. And if you're watching this back a bit later because you had some fun at Halloween, then hi to you as well. I will see you all same time next week. Until then, take care.